Morning, everybody. Welcome to our presentation today on the Aatrix Forms for Payroll and Accounts Payable. My name is Jeanette, and I'll be your guide today through some of the setups, and we'll actually demonstrate a couple of the forms that we can produce, print, and e-file through the Aatrix software. Before we get started, I want to remind you that in the GoToWebinar panel, there are three documents that are listed in the handout section. One is the PowerPoint that we're going to be looking at today, just a few screens in there. Mostly we're going to be in the software. There's also a PDF file for the steps that we're going to go through today for AP and payroll. And then there's a third PDF file for creating a prior year folder. And we'll demonstrate that and talk about the pros and cons of using that when we get into the payroll module. So if you can have those handy, at least the Aatrix section, that'll be good for you to take notes on as we go through the setup and the actual processing. Additionally, I want to point out too that if you have any questions as we go through, if you could type those in to the chat area in the web panel. At the end, we'll take a few minutes and go through any questions that you might have that I might be able to answer for you today. If I need to repeat anything, I can always go back again and get back in the software and do that. And I'll also remind you at the end that any questions that you think of later, you can always forward those to Tina or Lori, and they'll forward those on to me. And I'll be happy to get back to you on to answer those questions. All right, so today we're going to be focusing on Aatrix. We're going to go through a little overview of what Aatrix is. We're going to take a look at the registration and how the software is updated within Sage. We're going to talk about what your options are as far as e-filing and reporting is concerned. We're going to jump into accounts payable first. We're going to go through and look at some fields in settings, AP settings, and then the vendor. We'll also take a look at the prep report that you can run before we go in and actually run a test run of 1099 so that you can see the screens, what the fields look like, what the forms look like. Once we're done with accounts payable, we're going to do the same thing with payroll. We're going to look at the W2 setup. Actually, prior to that, we're going to actually do the backup. I'm going to show you how to make a test folder and what files to copy over. Then we'll review the W2 form setup. Then we'll go in and actually do a run of W2's. Now, additionally to that, we're also going to take a look at the quarterly reports. I'm going to demonstrate one state form and the 941 form. For those of you that are new to Sage 300 and haven't used Aatrix yet for your quarter end, we'll take a look at those Aatrix forms as well. We're not going to spend too much time on the ACA things. I'm going to show you where that information is. There are sections in the year-end guide for doing the ACA forms. We'll touch briefly on that. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at merging files. If you are in a situation where you have separated your field payroll from your executive payroll, I will show you how to merge those files together and do a total W2 run instead of doing them individually. All right, so just an overview about what Aatrix is. Several years ago, Sage stopped maintaining all of the different government forms, quarterlies and W2 forms. Just because because they maintain all 50 states, it just became too overwhelming for them to do all of that programming in-house. So they merged with a software company called Aatrix that interfaces directly with Sage 300. We actually have access to their software through the Sage Payroll and Accounts Payable programs that will allow us to run any of the government and state and federal forms or reports that you need for your company. Aatrix maintains all of those forms, keeping them up to date. They also allow you to file with them. So if you need to electronically file, they have that feature in the software as well. Now, they maintain, again, over 300 different federal and state forms. They're constantly updating and adding forms to the list. The printing of those forms is actually free. So you can run any of those things without having to pay an extra fee to the Aatrix company. Now, if you do decide that you want to e-file through Aatrix, there is a fee for that. And what I would recommend you do, and I'll mention this again as we get into the demonstration, is that you take a look at how many employees you have and how many of the forms you need to run. They have a kind of a set fee chart that they use where you can pay so much per year for all the forms that you need to generate. Now, this doesn't include the W2's or the 1099's. There is a separate fee for generating those forms as far as e-filing is concerned. And we'll look at that when we get to the screens where we're actually processing a report. We'll take a look at what those fees might be. Now, just on a personal note, I use Aatrix for myself, and I actually pay the fee, and I'm able to run all my state forms, federal forms, for it's right around $70 for the year. So that's printing and e-filing. And I was paying over $100 a month when I used a payroll service for it. So the cost difference is tremendous. There is a fee based on how many employees you have for your 1099's and your W2's. But again, it's worth the fee if you have quite a few employees and you're having to take the time to actually print the forms, put them in envelopes, mail them out. You may be saving quite a bit of money on labor costs and material. So it's something to think about. And again, we'll take a look at it when we get into the actual processing of the forms. Now, and which is this screen here is just exactly what I was talking about, that it's going to save time. Now, the other thing that Aatrix does offer is emailing of the W2's. So if you don't want them to print your forms and mail them, you can actually email or have Aatrix email the forms to your employees. Now, for those of you that are new to Sage or haven't used the Aatrix software yet, there is a registration that you're going to need to go through. And I'm going to jump into the PDF file for, let me find it here. Where did I put it? Oops. Let's see. And I think I put it, no, maybe I did. Here it is. Okay. So you'll need to go ahead and register with Aatrix. Let me go back to page 1 here. Oops. So I can show you the website that you're going to need to go to. All right, so you need to go out to efile.aatrix.com, and then it'll bring you into their website where there'll be an option for you to enroll. And then you'll go through these screens, putting in your your username and your password. So this is going to be the name of the person who is going to be running the e-filing of these forms. So whoever you put here, you need to put their username and their password, and that's what they will log in as when they get the prompt to actually e-file. You also need to put in contact information at the bottom. There's a section there for that. And then you'll need to go ahead and put in company information. This is at the top of page 3 in your handout. And then it's going to ask you to log in here at the bottom of page 3 to get the rest of the screens. Once you log in, it's going to ask you some security questions that you'll need to answer if something happens and you're logging back in and it needs to verify who you are. It doesn't actually ask you these questions when you're doing the e-filing. This is just for security. Okay. And then you'll get a thank you at the bottom of page 4. And then you'll see another window come up where it's going to ask you to go through some of these tabs to put in some information. Your company information, your bank information. So if you are going to use Aatrix to make payments, or if you want to store that information if you need to pay any fees or to pay the e-filing maybe fee, you can put your bank information in there. If you have multiple states, you need to use the Update Filing States section so that you can designate where your company is going to be filing. And then some of the states require PIN numbers. And so you'll need to go to the Additional Agency Requirements section to set that up. Okay. All right, so once you have that information in, then you will be able to use the Aatrix options within AP and Payroll. So I'm going to go ahead now. We're going to start with Accounts Payable, and I'm going to jump into the software, and we're going to go through a couple of screens here before we actually generate 1099s. All right, so the first thing I'm going to suggest or recommend that you verify before you start running your 1099s is to go into File, Company Settings, AP Settings. Make sure that your year-ending dates line up with the current year that you're in. Now, this is you're going to have to give this some thought. If you are already into January and you're starting to post and print checks prior to running your 1099s, if your dates are set the way you see right here, where your 1099 year-ending date is 12/31/2019, then your checks for 2020 are going to go into the next year field, which is fine. You can leave the 1099 year open until you actually print the forms for 2019. So that when you go in to run, it's going to, when it comes up with the year, it'll show you the year as being 2019. If this is sitting at 2018, if someone forgot to run the close year at the end of last year after 1099s, you need to close your year. 2019 is sitting in the last year bucket, the next year bucket. And if you start running 2020 information, you will be adding to that, which is not what you want. So if this date is sitting at 2018, close your 1099 year and move 2019 into the current year, and then 2020 will go into the next year bucket. So these dates are pretty important, especially if the date is not sitting in the current year before you start processing 2020 information. The other field that you need to be aware of is the retained 1099 totals per GL prefix. If you have multiple divisions or companies within your company data folder and you need to produce a 1099 form for each of those different companies or divisions to the vendor, then you need to check this box to retain 1099 totals per GL prefix so that you can run 1099s off the same vendor master file using the prefix instead of just running a grand total off the vendor. Now, if you forgot to check this box, before you run your 1099s, you're going to run Tools, Maintain Prefix Totals. And that will go through and separate out within the master file. It'll actually create those subtotals that you need by prefix for your 1099 run. Okay. So you don't have to have multiple vendors for each company or division that needs a form. They can all be, you can be writing checks to the same vendor for combined invoices. Right. The next thing I would recommend that you do is under Reports, under Miscellaneous, run the 1099 Preparation Report. And because of the way we have our setup AP settings done, we have the option to do it by vendor or by fiscal entity. If you are not checked to run by fiscal entity or by prefix, this window will not show up. And then here, just click. You can print it out or you can do a print preview. And what this report will do is it'll separate your vendors out by 1099 type on the vendor record, and it will give you a list of those vendors and the amounts that has been stored. Now, where these amounts are stored is on the vendor itself on the 1099 Settings tab. And so down here is where you see at the bottom of this window, you see the buckets for this year, last year, and next year. So that's why the dates in AP settings are so important, that you've got the years separated out, that this represents 2019, this represents 2018, that's last year. Next year is ready to start accumulating 2020. Okay. Then once your forms are done, you can run the closed 1099 year and this all switches. This year rolls into last year, next year rolls over to this year, and you're ready to keep going with 2020. Now the other thing on this window, you've got the vendor receives a Form 1099. If this is not checked, they won't be on the report. So if you're looking for someone and they are not on the 1099 prep report, come in here and double check that this is checked. On the form, if you need to check or have the box checked that this is the second notice for a tax ID number, check this box. If the proceeds were paid to an attorney, you need to move the amounts out of box 7, I think it is, to box 13, I think it is, the gross proceeds to an attorney. Check this box. The tax ID number for this vendor goes in this field here on the right-hand side. And if they do business under a different name, their tax ID name goes in the second box. And on the form, it will print this name first, the tax ID name prints first, and then right underneath it, it will say DBA, and it'll print the name, the vendor's name from the top of the screen. Under form type, we do 4 different forms: miscellaneous, non-employee, miscellaneous rents, interest, and dividend. If you have a vendor that needs more than one form type, you have 2 options. You can go ahead and leave them marked as the default if one of the forms is a miscellaneous non-employee compensation. run everything through to the same vendor ID, keep a list of how much needs to go to each form type, and then when you're ready to run the 1099s, turn on Audit Setup Activity, change this bullet to whichever the first one is that you want to run, and then come down in the box down here where it says 1099 amount paid, and change the amount to whatever the amount is for that form. Run your run of 1099s, come back into this vendor, change the form type to whatever it needs to be, and change the dollar amount again here to what that form needs to be printed for. Okay. And then once you're done, come back and change this again. Change it back to what the combined total is. That's one option. Your second option is to have two different vendor IDs and to separate those invoices as they come in to be paid between the two vendor IDs. Okay. Either one of those will work just fine. Okay. So once you have the vendors squared away, then you're ready to at least do a test run on your 1099s. So you'll come in under Tasks, and you'll go to Government E-File and Reporting, and you're going to select the 1099 form. Now, in your handout back on page 6, which we didn't get it, but if there has been a change to any of the forms, whether it's a 1099 form or a W2 form, you will get the prompt. And actually, let me go back into here and let's take a look at it. That you need to run an update. So if this window comes up on your screen here, you're going to need to go ahead and click the box, or the button, excuse me, for an automatic update. And once you do that, it's going to come through and give you a list of forms that it needs to update. So here you'll just hit the next button, and it's going to go through and it's going to update those forms. So remember that regardless of which state or which form you need to run, Aatrix is maintaining all of those different locations and all of those different forms. Anytime that there's a change to even one of those, the next time you go into the software, it's going to prompt you to do an update. Okay. All right, so when you get to this first window, we're doing a brand new 1099 report, so you're going to leave the bullet there and you're going to hit the next button. Now, depending on how you've got your AP settings marked, because we said we were going to store by prefix, we get this box right here. If that checkbox is not marked, then you do not get this top part of the screen. All you get is the form and the year, the minimum, and then a field for the federal ID number that you need to fill in. Now, if you leave this at to vendor, you've got to come down here and fill in the federal ID number. The software in AP does not have a place to store that number. Okay, so this is your company's federal ID. If you are running this by prefix and you change this to by fiscal entity, on these fiscal entities, there is a field in General Ledger under Setup Prefix for you to enter the federal ID number, and it will pre-fill for you. So the only time that you're going to need to fill something in is if you are doing this to vendor. Let's see. I'm going to do these by that. Okay. All right. And then on this window then, once you have filled in, and I think we'll go with 600 as our minimum. Now, it's only pulling in the vendors that are marked as miscellaneous. So let me go back to this previous window. Here's my form type here. Okay, so it defaults to that. If I need to run the interest or the dividend forms, I can use the drop down for that to change it. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so buttons down below. If you're doing a test run like we are today, I can tell it maybe I don't want to select anybody at this point, so I'm going to use the Select None button to turn off the check marks. I'm going to come back here then and select maybe just the first one. Right? And then click the Next button, and then click Generate. All right, now we're getting a forms update. Fine. Okay, so now is a really busy time of the year. So just be aware that you can run the forms or start the forms at one point, and then it's going to come back and say, "Oop, there's something has changed, and I need to do an update." So this was the window that we were looking at in the PowerPoint. So once this fills in, I'm going to click Next, and it's going to go out and update for me. Yeah, this is the time of the year, again, where things are changing by minute. I mean, it could be by the time we get to payroll, we're going to have to update again. Okay. Once it's done, it'll give you the prompt to close. Okay. And then depending where we are, I mean, it didn't boot us out, so it should be processing our 1099 form. So it just stopped, made us update, and then now it's continuing on with the rest of the screens to run the 1099s. We're going to do a test run here, so I'm going to change this bullet. You have the option to test run the first 25 or test run them all, or if you're ready to do the actual run, leave the bullet at no thanks, and it's going to do the official run of the 1099s. I'm going to change this to a test run. It's going to come back now, show me some company information. So just verify that your tax ID number is correct. This screen here for the multiple 1099 files, I'm going to demonstrate this to you in Payroll. So for this one, I'm going to say no. I use a single data file for this ID number. Again, it comes up and shows me company information that I can change. The tax preparer type, I'm filing this for my company. So I'll say next. If I need any state information on the forms, there will be some information here that you may have to fill in. You can use the Add button or the Edit, depending on what it's prompting. It's asking if anybody needs their 1099 forms electronically, meaning an email. I'm going to say no here. This is asking about IDs, so this has to do with Social Security numbers. So it wants to know here on the top part if you want to mask it with asterisks or X's, or if you're going to print the full number. Same with leading zeros. So I hit the next button after that. Now it's going out and it's compiling data. It's telling me I'm in test drive, so it's not going to save anything. Right. Then it brings up a verification window. So on this screen, it's verifying all of the information that it needs to print on the form And all you need to do on this screen is to hit the next button. And as you do that, it's going through the different sections of the form and verifying. And if it finds any mistakes or errors, it'll come back and tell you what those are and ask you to correct it. So just keep going. And this bar here shows you how far you've gotten. So it looks like we're making it through. All right. Here, this is just telling you how much it's going to cost for your the W-2 form or the 1099. So here, just hit your next button. And then this is showing you what it would cost if you're actually taking advantage of the e-filing service or not. I'm going to double click down here and I'm going to say, I just want you to print my forms. I'm not e-filing anything at this point, just so that you can see the printing of the forms. There's no cost for that. So if you're not going to use the e-filing options, just tell it other options and then tell it which forms you want to print. And you should see, again, a total cost of 0, and then hit your next. You have another screen that they're trying to get you to e-file here if you haven't checked it. And then just hit next there. This window is going to show you what it's going to print. Just hit next again. And it is generating the form. And I've got screenshots of most all of this in your handout. We're getting up here to page 17 in your handout. All right. So this is the 2018 form. That's because Sage has not released, Sage and Aatrix have not released the forms yet. So until you get the notice that Sage has completed the year-end release for you to download, you will probably, when you do the run on this, you'll see this as 2018. Once the forms have been updated by Aatrix, it'll come out with the 2019. So this, you can go ahead and run this and get a printout. Now, if you're verifying totals for the vendor, it might be that you might want to just do the federal form instead, which I can't go back now and do. But that would give you one form, or actually 2 forms, one on the top and one on the bottom. So 2 different vendors per sheet of paper. Otherwise, this is the recipient's form, and so you've got 4 forms. And normally you would print this on perforated paper, blank perforated paper. Now, once you're doing an actual run, not a test run, in your handout on page 18, when you click on Next Step, you'll get the screenshot at the top, which is asking you to make sure that everything looks right. If you agree or you want to move forward to the next step, you click the Agree button, and then you hit Next again. And that's when you will get this window where you can click the button to e-file or print if you are printing your forms instead of using Aatrix to do the forms. Right. Then once you are done with all the different steps, then you can actually close the program. Okay. And then this will actually close the that particular run. So it's, the printing of the 1099s is pretty simple and straightforward. You're verifying. I would say you probably will do the verification report, the 1099 preparation report, make sure it's okay. I would recommend at least one test run of the actual forms themselves before you actually do the full run and potentially the e-filing. All right, so that is the 1099 information. Let's talk about, next, let's talk about payroll. And we're going to start by talking about a prior year, creating a prior year folder. All right, so what I have already done in the sample data here is I have created a new folder called 1099 Payroll. And within that folder, the steps for this in the second handout, creating a prior year payroll folder, I've shown you how to go to File, New Company, and create that folder. And you can call it anything that you'd like. I just called mine 2019 Payroll. And then I'm showing you down below how to look for your path name. Go back to OnPoint Company. You need the path name for your main data folder. So you need to know what this location is here. And the reason for that is that within this 2019 folder, you need to go into Company Settings, File Locations, and you need to go down to some of these application types like Cash Management, Master and Transaction, General Ledger, Master, Equipment Master if you're using the Equipment module, so Master and Standard. You need to put those names into the where it says Data Folder, that larger field there next to each of those file types. The reason for that is that if you are going to use this folder to look up information from 2019, some of the inquiries and reports use information from these files. And by pointing the 2019 folder back to your main data folder, you'll be able to do those inquiries and reports. Otherwise, whenever you start to run any of those types of things, it's going to come back with an error that it can't find the cash management files, or it can't find the equipment, or it can't find GL or job cost. And by setting file locations to point to your main data folder, that'll eliminate those errors coming up when you go to run those particular things. Now, the next thing that you're going to do is copy files from your main data folder into this new backup folder. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to open back up the sample data. And then I'm going to use Tools, File Tools, and I'm going to leave the bullet here on this first window at backup. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do backup. I'm going to do copy. Sorry. Change that to copy and then hit next. And then I'm going to use Add Files. And I'm going to select the files that I need to copy over. I'm going to copy them from Timberline Construction, the sample data folder, over to my 2019 folder. So I'm going to, I'm just going to do them one file at a time. So I'm going to grab the master.prm, and I just start typing the word master, and it gives me a list of the files that start with the word master. And I'm going to grab the master PRM file and open it. And then I'm going to use Add Files again, and I'm going to grab the current, and I want the current.prt file. And then I'm going to Add Files again, and I'm going to grab the system. the system.prs file. This is where all of your deductions and pays and fringes, all that setup is stored in this file. And then the other thing I'm going to grab is the, let's see, I don't have it listed, but I'm going to grab the tax, add files again, and I'm going to grab tax.prx. Okay. Now, my tax file is located in my data folder. If your tax file is not located there, then you need to change the path name to wherever that tax file resides. It could be in the miscellaneous folder under Timberline Office 9.5 Accounting. But I want to make sure that you know to grab these 4 files: your master file, your current file, your system file, and your tax file. And then you're going to click into the destination, click the Browse button, and you're going to browse out to where your backup folder is. So I'm going to go down to Program Data, to Sage, to Timberline Office, to Data, and there's my folder right there at the top. And I'm going to OK that, and then I can next. Make sure all your lights are green. It won't let you make the copy if you have any red lights here. So whatever the error is, you need to correct that first before you try the copy again, so that you have all green lights, and then just next all the rest of the way through. Okay. So now we have a copy of the payroll. You're going to do this after you have finished the final entries for 2019. Now you have a backup of the data, so that in your main data folder, you can go ahead and close the year so that you can run the first payroll for 2020. Then when it's time to run your W-2s, you have a choice. You can either run your W-2s in your current folder using the prior year data, or you can run your W-2s out of your prior year backup folder. Right? So, and that's one of the reasons that we copied the tax file over. Okay. Now, if you decide that you are going to run your forms out of the backup, you need to go into that folder and you need to use the File, Company Settings, General, and you need to put your correct company information in here. Because I'm sure you don't want to run forms that say 2019 payroll. You need your real company name, address, all information, so that it prints on the forms correctly. Now, if you run your W-2s prior to closing the year, we can run our W-2s out of our main folder. Either way. You can run them from the main folder for the current year or the prior year. All right, so before we get to W-2s, let's take a quick look at some of the other forms, especially for those of you that are new to Sage or you haven't used the Aatrix Forms inside Payroll at all. So under the Task dropdown, we have 2 areas for Aatrix. We have the State e-file and reporting, and we have the Federal. So if we go under State e-file and reporting here, based on the state that you select, and there's a drop down here at the top, okay, it'll give you a list of reports, and you'll select the correct form that you need to process for the state. So I'm going to select this one, and it's a quarterly. I'm going to switch this to, it's the 4th quarter for 2019. And again, I'm just going to pick one person and generate. Now, the difference that you're going to see in the payroll is that when the forms come up, some of the boxes are going to be in red. And prior to running the form, you have to fix it. Otherwise, it's not going to let you do the form. So just OK through those warning screens that come up, and then you need to go ahead and fill in whatever it's telling you. Let's see, we'll just do 0 here to get through this. 0. And sometimes the red, if it has 0, you still need to enter the amount as 0 to get all of the red information to come off the screen. Right? And then the other thing to pay attention to here is up in the upper left-hand corner. If the form is multiple pages, be sure that you click the arrow button to get to the screen so that you can put the amounts in. Okay. If there's anything in red that you can, so that you can correct it. Okay. Then up at the top, you've got buttons here to save, to print, and then to go on to the next step. So this is similar to what we saw in the 1099 options. Okay. So just make sure that you watch for multiple pages, that you watch for the save buttons, the print button, the next step. Okay. Oop, I'm missing some stuff. And again, it's going to warn you, not let you go forward. All right. So let's see. We'll do. And again, we have to fix all of this. Good. Okay. And then we would need to save it again. And then print it. Do the next step. Yep, we know it wants money. Yep. Okay. All right, so here again, we're getting the prompt here to agree to double check it. And then on the next window, we would get the option to do the e-filing. And if you're not ready, just go ahead. We're not going to actually file that form. Just go ahead and close out. All right. Under the federal e-filing, some of the 2019 information is here. We're going to look at a 941. The W2, W3 reports forms are not out there yet, so you can keep checking by going into Aatrix to see when those have been updated by Aatrix. By the time you get the Sage year-end update, those forms should be out there. So I'm going to go ahead and just run one. Now, pretty much the Aatrix workflow is pretty simple and repetitious. Once you do a couple of these, most of the screens that pop up, you're just going to be hitting the next button because it's already been filled in with your company information, or it's pulled the information correctly out of the data files, and so you're really not having to make that many changes to it. So here again, we're looking for red. So we're going to pretend here that we paid that. Okay. Again, up at the top, look for the multiple pages. Make sure that you've got everything checked. And then fill in the information down below. Okay. What is it you want? Fractions of cents here. Okay. Well, I don't know what your fraction of cent is off by. We'll just put a penny in there for now. Okay, is everything good? Everything's good. There's no red. Look back over here again, no red. So here we can, again, use the save button and then do the next step, which would be to agree. And then again, the next screen that would come up would be your e-filing option. Okay. All right. No. All right, let's talk about W2's. Aatrix does use the W2 form that you create and modify within Sage. So the first thing you need to do is go ahead and come in under Tools, Modify Forms, W2 Forms. The software comes with a default form, so you can go ahead and use that. The only thing that you'll need to do here is put your minimum in. You don't want to print forms for anybody that doesn't have earnings for the year. And then on the Amounts tab, you'll need to come in and lock in if you need to report anything extra on the form. Like our example here, we need to print the 401k contribution. So any of the mandatory government types of items that need to go in box 12, you've got 5 lines here that you can put information into. And then it's a 2-part entry. The first part is the federal number, or the federal letter. And if we go to help on this, let's see. Okay, let's look at box 12. And we can drill to it. Here's the list of the different items. Now, the most common one is the D for the 401k, but you may have other types. So here's a Roth down below. You've got Roth, and there's actually 2 for a 401k Roth and a Section 403B Roth. There's some other different types. So there's an S. What I would recommend you do is that you go ahead and print this page out of help within the software, and then just make sure on your form, if you're using any of those, that you put the code in here. So what goes in here is the letter in the first part of the form, or first part of the field, And then in the larger area, you're going to use the buttons on the side to pull in whether it's a deduction or a fringe, however it's been set up. That's what you're going to pull in the larger area here. So it's going to use this either deduction or fringe or even a pay ID, depending on what it is, to go out to the check records in your data folder to come up with the dollar amount that needs to print on the form. Now, these are only going to pull, if I pull the deduction, let's say, off of this list, this is assuming that it's the current year. So if you have closed your year, this isn't going to work because it's going to be trying to pull current information, not prior year information. So what you need to do, if you are running this off of last year's fields, you've closed the year and you're going to run your W-2 forms out of your main data folder, you need to create formulas. And you would do that by creating a lookup formula. So let me demonstrate that for you real quick here. Let me cancel this. And let me go into Tools, Formulas, and let me create a brand new formula. And you're going to do a lookup, and you're going to look up out of the employee deduct record. And you want prior year deduction. And you need to use the employee record to get the employee ID. And then you need to put inside quotes, the deduction ID. All right. So what we're saying here is go out and look up the prior year deduction using the employee ID and grab that prior year deduction amount for the 401k. That's the name of our deduction. And we're going to call this prior YTD 401k. And then over here under Tools, Modify Forms, W-2 Forms, put penny back in there. I can come over here to Amounts, and right here, instead of pulling the deduction, I'm going to grab the formula instead. Okay. And that's going to pull in my amounts. Now, I don't have to do that for any of these other boxes. The system knows, depending on the year that I select for the information at the top of the form, so anything in boxes 1 through, well, I guess anything through for boxes 1 through 9, it knows if I'm running this on last year's date to go get prior year for that information. But it doesn't know that for box 12, anything you print in box 12, or anything that you print in box 14. So here, box 14 allows you 3 extra items. You're going to use the text box to put your description in. So this might be your health insurance that you're showing on the form. And then again, over here in the larger area, you would pick whatever it is that we need to show. Okay. And I'm going to put this back here to 401k. Right. All right, so again, prior to running your W-2 forms, you need to take a look at the format, the form. Look at the amounts window that looks just about like a W-2, and make sure that you've addressed boxes 12 and 14. Now, one other thing, you do not need to create a W-2 form for each year. The system will look, when we go to run the W-2s, it's going to, by default, pick the one form that's out there that's called default. If you create a form, let me save this, and I create a form called this, and I put in here, put this in, and I change, make my changes here. Whoop. And I set it up exactly the same way as the other one. Then when I go to run my forms, it's going to come up with a little window and ask me which form I want to use. The only time I would suggest that you do this is maybe have a form for the current year and for the prior year. That way, depending on which folder you decide to use and when you decide to run them, you can pick the form that's going to give you the correct information. So you might have one form that is current year and one form that says prior year. Other than that, there's no reason to create a form for each year that has the exact same setup as the default, because then you're just having to answer an extra screen when you go in to run the W-2's. Okay, so I'm going to actually delete this one. I don't need it. All right, so I'm going to come back then to tasks, and this time again, federal e-filing. It's a new report. I'm going to have to use the 2018 because 2019 is not out there yet. So even though my year is 2019, I'm just running a test run on the using the 2018 form. And we'll just pick one person. Whoa. What? What? Maybe not. What log? Oh boy. Whoa. Index and length. What are you talking about? Huh. All right, let's see if I can restart payroll. My apologies. Okay. Oh, that's very strange. Nope. Got a little farther this time. Okay. Wow. All right. All right, so we're going to just go ahead and take a look at the handout because I've got, let's see. Let me get to where we've got the screenshots in here. That's very strange. Something must have happened in the update that it did. Oops. Come on. Let's jump here. Okay. Why are you? Okay, here we go. All right, that doesn't make any sense here, but this is where I did the forms here. All right, so I picked the one person. This is on page 29 in your handout, and then it prompted me to do the test run. So I changed the bullet on this next screen on page 30 at the top that I was doing a test run, and then hit your next button, and it brings up your company information screen. Just make sure everything is filled out there. Make sure that you are filing for your company here at the bottom of page 31. Then on page 32 at the top, it's going to ask you about your IDs. It's going to give you a window that shows you your state information. So it will prompt you if it needs to, if you need to correct anything on this screen as far as IDs or missing tax IDs. So go ahead and add and edit what you need, and then hit your next button.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But we do have a question.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it says, is it possible? Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. Is it possible to get a recording? Oh, that's a question for me. I'm sorry.
No worries. No worries. Okay. 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 So again, down below, you need to answer some questions about data verification. So if you have anybody who's exempt from Medicare or Social Security, if you need control numbers, or if anybody needs to receive their forms via email. Okay. Then on the next window, you need to check your box for 941. This is on page 33. And then down below, you're going to leave this if you are a single company. Your forms are, you don't have two data folders or two named files that you need to pull information together for, then you're going to leave this at no. I'm going to come back in a minute and talk about multiple data files or data folders for the W-2s. Okay, then just hit your next button. On the next screen, you're going to see about the printing options on page 34 at the top. To do the test run, just change this to other options, and then I would just print your federal W-2. Check that box, and the cost should come back at 0. Okay. All right, and then next, and then it's going to show you or ask you if you want divider sheets. I would probably say not. It's going to show you which forms are going to print. Just hit your next button, and then it'll show you on page 36 is the W-2 form. And again, this is the 2018 form, which worked for me before, so not sure why. Then I actually did both. I did an employee form, and then on page 37, I'm showing you the W-3 form for 2018. Okay. All right. I'm going to jump back into payroll. This might be, I had set up a way to demonstrate the multiple data files for you, and this might be why it's erroring out for me now. I need to come in here, and I'm going to turn on named files. The example I'm going to show you is named files where you've separated your executive or admin payroll from your main data folder. So I've got named files turned on for both the master and the transaction file. And then I'm going to go ahead and come in and run the W-2s. Okay. Now, this is slightly different than before. It's asking us for the master file. So I'm going to run this first to get the executive employees. And then I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then I've got a separate transaction file for those for that person as well, or individual. So I've got an admin master and an admin current file. Darn it. Okay. That's not going to work. All right, so let me go back here, which is what you see on page 38. It says 2012, but I updated that, sorry, 2019. So what happens here then is when you get the window that asks you if you are using multiple data folders or files versus a single data folder, you're going to answer multiple. And then it's going to come up with a screen here at the bottom of page 39 where it's going to ask you, or you're going to click on the Save button. So you're saving the first run of employees in a file. Okay. Then you're going to go all the way through that step. Then you're going to come back and run it a second time, and you're going to pick the field employees. And you're going to run it through, all the way through. Then you run it a third time, and you select the two files. You'll actually see the two files that you've created in this grid down here on the bottom of the screen. You're going to check mark the two files, and then you're going to click Merge. And then once that happens, you go all the way through, you're going to get a full run of W2's with those two data files merged together. Okay. And it's basically the same way if you've got it in two separate data folders. You run the first run of W2's in company 1, and you do the same thing. You tell it that you're doing multiple data folders, and then you click the Save button. And then you run it a second time, and you run the Save again. And then let's see, and actually, there's a little bit of a difference there. You run it for the first folder. This is on page 40, in between the two screenshots. You actually run export. There's an export button on the screen. It's right here. It's like the third button down. And then you run it again, and you answer yes, and then you run it, and then you run Save, and then you actually run it again. You have to run it 3 times again, and then you use the import button. And then you're again pulling the two the two sets of data together into one run on the W2's. All right, in your book or your handout again, I've got the forms listed for you, for the 1099's and the W2's, the paper. But first, I've got a form screen here in the PowerPoint that talks about how many forms we have available. Again, there's no cost. The different federal forms, the 940s, 41s, W2's, certified report. You can even do your tax deposits through Aatrix and have them, if you've got your bank information set up, they can actually make your tax deposits for you. And also your ACA forms are there as well. And then your state forms withholdings, again, deposit forms, unemployment, new hire forms. So a whole list, treasure trove of reports that Aatrix provides as part of the Sage payroll. And then your paper required, this is on page 43 in your main handout. If you're letting Aatrix do all your printing and your e-filing, the only thing you need to print is just a company copy, record copy, print those to blank paper, and you're done. If you are going to be printing your own forms, you need blank 4-part perforated paper. And the same with your 1099's. So if you're letting Aatrix do it all, just print your company copy for filing, and that there at your company, that's all you need, just on plain paper. Otherwise, you need perforated 4-part paper for the 1099's. Okay. All right, the forms for the ACA forms. The 1095 B's and C's and the 1094's B's and C's. Again, I think Aatrix prints those for you. In your handout, starting on page 44, there is some information about the ACA setup information, which I'm not going to go through all of that today, just that it is listed there under tasks, federal e-filing. And we'll just take a look at the, that's not what I wanted you to do. Let me turn off named files here. Wanted you to get me to that first screen so I can show you that it's all there. Where are you? There it is, up at the top. So your 2 forms are listed here for ACA. And I do have screenshots all the way through running the form. The screens up to the form are exactly the same. The verification form that's on, or the screen that's on page 51 is slightly different. So this looks a little bit different than what you see on the W2's or these other forms. It'll go through, as you're going through and verifying each person, it's going to show you what the error is or what needs to be corrected on the right side of the screen. And then on page 52 in your handout, it shows the forms. Page 52 and 53. Right. And in the year-to-date guide, there is a whole chapter on doing your the 1094's and the 1095's. And it's actually chapter 8, producing ACA forms. So that can help you go through getting the forms printed out as well. Okay. All right, so a couple of reminders about your Aatrix forms. And again, I apologize that I was not able to actually demonstrate the W-2s. I had actually gone through even this morning and verified that everything was going to work correctly, and obviously something changed between the time that I ran it this morning and right now. So my sincere apologies for that. Just remember, printing your forms is free. So you don't have to take advantage of the e-filing unless you've got a lot of employees and it makes more sense to go ahead and let Aatrix do it for you. Filing forms, again, for your company. If you would like to take advantage of that, I would take a look at the pricing table that they have on the Aatrix website and see again if that can't be a good advantage for your company. Again, it's going to save time and headaches. It does for me. Within Sage, you can use Modify Forms, W-2 forms like we looked at to get your form set up correctly. You can also use the Modify Forms. The quarterly report option is still in Sage. So if you want to use that to verify data, that's a good idea. You can still use the Modify Forms and use the print quarterly forms within the Sage software. So I want to thank you for joining us today. A reminder that we are repeating the year-end procedures class next Tuesday, same time. So if you missed our first class, or if you'd like to sit through it again, we're going to be covering all the year-end processes for each of the other applications. So we'd be happy to see you there if you decide to join us. So any questions, Lori or Tina? Do we have any questions in the panel, in the chat area?
No, there doesn't seem to be any questions.
Okay, if you guys think of anything later, please email Lori or Tina, and they will forward that on to me, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have as far as any of the Aatrix setup. And I want to thank you again for joining us this morning, and I hope to see you in another session soon. Thank you.